This is Keys to the Shop, episode 437, The New Age of the Barista. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFiorio, and I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Be sure to subscribe to the show. That really helps out a lot. It helps the show in the rankings, and it keeps you updated with new content as it comes out. And that's great because there's a lot of content delivered on Keys to the Shop. You don't want to miss out on something that could really help change your career and your business for the better. So go ahead and subscribe to Keys to the Shop, and also share these episodes. And if you get the opportunity, rate or review this show. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, or I guess now it's called Apple Podcasts, and then also any other place where you can, like Spotify. 5-star review goes a long way. And thank you so much, everybody, for doing that. Now, a couple of things. Keys to the Shop, by this time you might know, we do consulting and coaching as well as this podcast. So what that looks like is I get to work one-on-one with people who are either opening a coffee shop for the first time and need advice along the path, where we avoid needless mistakes. We help build a foundation for profitability, for success, for building something that truly is going to thrive long into the future. I've really been thrilled to help so many people do just that. Also working with people who have existing coffee shops but want to make the coffee shop better. They want to improve their operations, their culture, or their craft, or they just want an assessment for the cafe to see how they're doing, and we coach afterwards. In those cases, it's been such a dynamic relationship with so many great business owners. And maybe that's something that sounds interesting to you, and you'd like Keys to the Shop to work one-on-one with you to assess your cafe or your situation, whether it's starting a coffee shop for the first time or refining your existing operation to help give you profitability, freedom, and joy in the process of running a great coffee shop. Go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. We'll set up a free discovery call and talk all about what's going on in your business, and if working with Keys to the Shop Consulting is the right fit for you. Again, that email is chris@keystotheshop.com. And also stay tuned, because we recently launched the key holder coaching groups. Existing business owners, you've got some years in the industry, you've got your coffee shop, maybe you've got a shop and a roastery or a few shops and a roastery, but you need camaraderie, you need accountability, and a group of people to help collaborate for your success. And that is what the key holder coaching groups are all about. And like I mentioned, our first group is underway. It's already been so helpful for the people who have gotten the focus of the group on their particular situations. And it is just so thrilling to see already the progress being made after just one meeting. And so if you're interested in being a part of a key holder coaching group with other like-minded business owners to help each other succeed, then go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. Registration for this and applications open up in about the beginning of spring in 2024. If you want to be considered for this, go ahead and email me, and I will put your name on the list. chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, you all know I'm a big fan of the Ground Control Brewer from Voga Coffee. This brewer has been really shaking up the industry, elevating batch brew coffee beyond what any of us thought batch brew coffee could actually do. SCA award-winning technology in a really smartly designed package. It's an eye catcher. It elevates quality. And not only does it make awesome batch brew coffee, but also the extraction technology allows you to make batch iced lattes, batch cold brew. The concentrates are being used for iced lattes. And as for the cold brew, you can get cold brew in under 8 minutes with the Ground Control Brewer. And right now, they have launched the next generation of the Ground Control. You can get this new brewer at 45% less in terms of investment than the Cyclops pricing with their early bird special. So reach out to them, groundcontrol.coffee. Take advantage of that early bird pricing, 45% less than the Cyclops. The unit itself is beautiful. It's shorter than the original Cyclops, 30% higher volume for batch espresso and cold brew concentrates, and it's cloud connected to a smart dispenser that tracks all your brewing data. So this is an amazing innovation I really encourage you to think about getting this machine for your cafe. Check them out again over at groundcontrol.coffee. You know, the number one thing we think about in the coffee shop besides coffee, it's our customers. Hopefully it's our customers. And, one of the things we have to think about is what we're serving them. And people are requesting plant-based beverages more than regular milk beverages these days in many places. So choosing the right beverage for them is something we should be thinking about. And I would encourage you to think about getting the Barista series from Pacific. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages designed for baristas and approved by baristas around the world as the cornerstone of the plant-based beverage market. It stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture for latte art, keeps the balance of the taste focused on the coffee. Check them out over at pacificfoodservice.com. Get samples and try it for yourself. I think you're going to be very pleased. So will your customers. Again, check them out, pacificfoodservice.com. If you want the best plant-based beverages for your customers, try the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today I wanted to talk about something that's really been on my mind lately. Of course, that's every show that we do here. So this actually falls in line with some of our episodes prior, which is some advice to baristas, except now, I've been thinking about what the barista of the future is going to need to be successful. We've all seen what's going on in the industry in terms of technology and just the ubiquitous presence of quality coffee. Now, I tell you this as somebody who's been in the industry for over 2 decades. I've seen the ebb and the flow of the industry and how it was very difficult to get reasonably good tasting coffee or consistent coffee these days because of education, because of connectivity through technologies and social media, because of training and machinery and that kind of tech. We have some of the most consistent and high quality coffees in some of the most far-flung places just across the globe, really. Of course, that doesn't mean that every place has it, but it's more than usual. So more people are familiar with good coffee than usual, your customers included. And so what used to make a barista successful was knowing just a little bit about coffee at all. I remember getting hired once because I knew latte art. Now, that is one of the worst reasons to hire somebody. I'm grateful for the opportunity. And at the time, sure, you could say it shows initiative. This person is desirous to learn about coffee. And yeah, you'd be right. And I was. That doesn't mean I was the right fit, and it worked out. But the point is that back in the day, if you had a little bit of extra knowledge or you showed yourself to be at all interested in coffee, that was something that could really get you by. And I've been hired for jobs early in my career because I was riding the wave of popularity of certain trends, because I was a latte artist and that kind of thing. And it is fine to use those opportunities. In fact, I encourage you to use those opportunities, but that doesn't lead to a sustainable career necessarily. Taking advantage of opportunities can easily pigeonhole you, and you might get passed by if you're not paying attention to what the industry needs or how the role is evolving of what a professional barista does and what a professional barista contributes in value, not only to a business, but to the customer and to the industry. And so today I wanted to talk a little bit about this new age of the barista as we consider automations, as we consider how now I think one of the key differentiators for the coffee shop in total is the experience of that coffee shop, not necessarily whether the barista is able to pour a swan or not. I mean, that kind of thing in doing latte art at all right now in a lot of areas is just expected. It's common. It doesn't matter as much as it used to matter. And that's just the way it is. That's actually a sign of success, you think, is like saturation. It used to be very novel. Now it's everywhere. You can see it on creamer boxes, Whole Foods and Kroger or wherever. We've reached peak here, right? So there's something deeper. There's something more that people are looking for beyond trends. And we're always going to have trends. We want an experience. And how that happens is dependent on how people show up. And on this show, we talk a lot about how managers and leaders show up. And if you're a manager or leader, I think this episode definitely still is for you, because some of the things we're going to talk about, you can actually help facilitate for baristas that you are given charge to serve. So let's dive into some of these things. This really is going to be, for you baristas listening to this, critical for your success in the industry. Now, before I jump in, can you be a full-time barista and make it as a career decades in? Still, probably not, but there are some who can, because they fall in with the company that will reward them with a living wage or can produce a living wage for that person, and they stick around for a very long time. That's rare. It's not rare because people are universally stingy. I want to be very clear here. The idea that everybody has a mind who is a boss to exploit you is bogus baloney and is just not the case. And it's a very reductive way to think about the dynamic between boss and employee. Yeah, there are bad bosses out there. Are there people who actually do exploit baristas? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's the rule. Okay, and that's one of the things that you have to grab a hold of as a barista, is the fact that where you are right now might only be able to give you so much in terms of pay. And at that point, you have a decision to make. Your decision is whether or not you are going to use that as an excuse to sabotage your own career by not growing because you're trying to basically stick it to the man, or you're going to be mature about it and you're going to grow in spite of, even if you feel like you're being held back without reason, you could hold yourself back by being bitter about it. It's time to grow up if you want to be a professional. Of course, you don't want to put up with abusive situations, but you have to be careful that you're not blowing up less than ideal situations into something that it's not. There have been plenty of times where I've seen people complain about something and trump up the idea of what's happening to something that's toxic, which is actually just circumstantial, because they feel like they need to, because it's an excuse. And that's just the nature of what it's like to be young, passionate, and frustrated in an industry. I have completely been there, and I've done things and said things to people who have been doing their job well or have given me things. I have said things that are insulting because I thought I deserved more. I have, as one boss told me, careful not to slap a gift horse in the mouth. You know, looking a gift horse in the mouth is a saying. In other words, you're being given something. Don't start complaining about something that's being given to you. In this case, it had to do with competition and, you know, what I was being given as assets and resources for it. It was a really embarrassing thing for me. But like I said, when you're young, passionate, and frustrated in the industry, it's easy for you to get a group of your friends together and everybody to just confirm to each other that we're all victims, we're all being repressed by evil bosses and whatnot. And even if that were true, what is that gaggle of confirmation bias going to do for you as a barista? I'll tell you what it did for me. It made me make bad decisions about, my own career. It made me not pay attention to what I could have been doing with my time. Instead, I was thinking about what other people should be doing. That's the first thing that you need to think about. Think about your career and how you can use where you are right now to be a better version of yourself for whatever role you find yourself in the industry from here. You might not always be a barista, and you might not be able to afford to always be a barista. Your boss might not be able to afford to have you always be a barista. Again, there are exceptions out there. I applaud those people and those bosses that can do that. But you might end up having to become a manager to warrant more pay with more responsibility. That is the nature of what we do. There are entry-level jobs that pay certain amounts because the skill involved in those jobs is not as great as the skill involved in another job. And the value of what you sign up to do in work is based on your employer's decision to value those things. So you enter in knowingly to this, don't forget. And you can take that role and make it even more valuable by showing up in a mature and forward-thinking way, in an intentional way every day. Even the worst jobs that I've had in the past, where I did actually have, for some reason, the presence of mind to pay attention, besides feeling sorry for myself, I actually learned a lot in those moments. So for you baristas that are listening to this, that's my caveat. As we talk about the new age of the barista, we need to make sure that you're showing up, taking charge, taking ownership of each experience, and don't shoot yourself in the foot by saying, well, this is less than an ideal circumstance. It would be a waste of energy. I'm telling you right now, it's a waste of energy to complain, as much as I hear people complaining these days. If you want something to change, if you want coffee shop owners to be better, maybe one day you can open a coffee shop, or when you become a manager, you be a better manager. When you become a coffee shop owner, you be a better owner. But if you have a bad owner or a bad manager, there's no amount of complaining that is going to change that person. I'm telling you, I've had plenty of places that I've worked where the manager wasn't great. And, if I was complaining all the time, it's not going to change their heart, but it taught me how to be a better manager by observing them. So, of course, barring anything that does need to be brought up as a legitimate complaint against abusive situations, that's always something that we need to make sure you're not going to put up with something that is truly damaging. But when somebody is inept, or you don't like the cut of their jib and that kind of thing, it's not a reason for you to just all of a sudden throw a temper tantrum and arrest the development of your own career because you have a hard time getting along with somebody. So while at the same time, I think you need to focus on your career and getting what you can from this, you also need to make sure that you have the ability to get over yourself and to realize that you too have the ability to contribute to the toxicity, the dysfunction, etc., of any job that you happen to be a part of. Okay, you are part of the equation. And so let me get into the new age of the barista and some of the things that I think you should be thinking about as you enter into this industry. First, you have to think about who you are as a barista. Yes, barista is the place where we all start. It is also a very important role. And if you take your role seriously, you will do a better job in your role. You are a guide to your customers in terms of coffee. They'll ask you questions and you should have answers. Even if you didn't get trained, you should still have, answers. There's no reason why you shouldn't know things. And if it's relevant to your job, you should be trying to find out as much as you can. You are a guide. You are a maker of experiences. You are a caretaker of the coffee, of people, of a space. And you equip people for success with coffee. There is an incredible amount of responsibility on your shoulders as a barista. And as soon as you take ownership of your own success in that role, the happier you're going to be. We live in a golden age of available information for you to be able to do whatever role you have right now very, very well. There's an episode of the show where we talk about how you need to study the rules. If you go to become a barista at some cafe and you within a few weeks don't really know the manual front and back and backwards, and that is not something that you have studied in earnest, you don't know the recipes, you don't know the policies and that kind of thing, what are we even doing? Half of us know way more about coffee agronomy just based on passive reading than we do about, the company's policies about scheduling, or the company's story and the philosophy of how we roast coffee, or how to answer questions about the blend. We feel like the answers are out there, but we're not studying how to be successful in the role we've got. We're already jumping to some grandiose fantasy about being a coffee professional somewhere in the ether. You have to take your responsibility seriously, but by outsourcing your development to something that is not your day-to-day job, you are being irresponsible. You are taking that responsibility that, let's face it, everybody in the supply chain at this point has counted upon you to actually have your stuff together. And of course, managers, owners, this is something that you need to take seriously as well in helping people be successful in this. But whether or not that's being provided for you, there is something you can do to take ownership for yourself and say, I do take my role as a barista seriously, and I will be as successful as I possibly can be. And I'm not going to get my feelings hurt if somebody doesn't tell me what's in the blend. I will ask what's in the blend. I will take ownership because people are counting on me. Customers are counting on me. And guess what? You're counting on you as well, because the future you is going to look back and say, why did I waste so much time waiting for everybody to give me stuff that I could have got for myself? Or why am I spending so much time complaining about the stuff I'm being given that it wasn't perfect instead of learning it as well as I could and helping contribute to refining it myself? You can be a positive contributor rather than just a critic who develops, this sense of entitlement, which holds us back as an industry. So who you are and how you approach your job here has to be with respect to what it means in aggregate for the entire industry. If every barista in the world got just 1% to 5% better in hospitality and consistency overnight, you can bet that would send shockwaves across the industry. We would see growth in this industry like we'd never seen before. Value. The people want to pay more for coffee. They need a better experience than what they currently get. So if you are a barista, you need to take your role seriously. And this comes into the next thing, which is personal ethics and standards is what your work ethic is made of. So you need to actually know yourself well enough to know what your work ethic is and what the ethic you're serving at work is. You can't go into the coffee shop and say, hey, can you guys tell me what my mission is or what my values are? You can't just go in there as a blank slate. There's a great book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, but there's another book he wrote called The E-Myth Manager, and he talks about how a manager can easily go into a company as this vacuum. There's nothing in them, and all they want is to be filled up with whatever the company tells them is valuable or what the mission is, etc. And the argument there is, no, you come into this with an already existing why, something that you've already matched up to what this company does. And what that does is it creates this synergy. It creates this harmonizing effect, this resonance that expands what's going on there. If all you're doing is entering as a vacuum and just doing whatever because you have nothing of yourself to offer, nothing that you've developed yourself in terms of an ethic or a work ethic or standard and greater meaning and value, you're going to be a drain on the business. And then you're going to complain that the business doesn't have much to offer after you took all of that from them. So you need to be developing yourself beyond work to offer something in the mix of work that's harmonizing with the values that company has. That's something you can do by researching the companies that you actually apply to be a part of as a barista. And if it's not working out right now in a place, you can go and find a place where it does feel like this is a place where I can grow, where I can contribute. My why is harmonizing with what the business is about, and flourish and dedicate yourself to the success of that business in that way. Okay. So again, I think you should really consider that the type of boss you're going to be, whether it's in coffee or not, or the type of employee or owner you're going to be, is dependent on the kind of employee you are today. If you're not good at being led, you're not a good leader. If you're not a great employee, you're not going to be a great boss. If you haven't taken ownership over yourself in the menial tasks, in the small things, in the invisible things, in the things that don't get rewarded, you're not going to get things in your life that will give you a reward. It's that whole idea, he who is faithful with little will be given much. And so this is the mentality I think that a professional has. It's like Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art, I believe. If you're a professional, you show up consistently, whether you feel like it or not. And what that does is it helps you be consistent so that you get the gains that come from that momentum built up over time. Even in a business that you feel is less than ideal for you, maybe you can't get another job. You can still grow in that business by showing up with the right mindset daily. And I have been there where it's not like other jobs were available. I didn't like where I was working. Eventually I was able to leave, but I wasted time just always daydreaming about leaving. Time I could have been spending becoming a better employee, taking more ownership over my shift and myself and That way, when I had the opportunity to leave to find something that fit a little bit better for me, I would be able to receive that with much more success. And these are the things you learn over time. So future you needs current you to show up as a professional as much as you possibly can. Now, there was a question that somebody asked on an Instagram post recently about leading. And the question was really about, I'm not a leader yet, I'm not a manager yet, but I hopefully will be soon. But how am I supposed to lead if I don't have a leadership position? And that's a question that we all, I think, have at times. And this next point that I want to make is that if you're going to be a barista, a successful barista, you need to organize yourself and lead from where you are. So you need to enter mindfully into the day, knowing pretty well what's going to happen and how you need to show up and who you need to be at work. Trust me, nobody wants your viscerally authentic self at work. I mean, none of us are just letting it all hang out at work. And if you are, then that's special. We are putting on a performance here at work. Who we are at work doesn't have to be not genuine, but we have to organize ourselves in a way that says, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're about today. This is an organized, not a chaotic presence of people that are all set to accomplish a certain task, serving hundreds of people drinks and food and cleaning our space and communicating well with each other and with them and upholding the values of the business. I mean, this is what we're all about. That requires organization individually before any kind of corporate organization can actually be successful. So again, you have to show up, and you can be a great example right where you are, even if you are just a first-year barista. Yeah, you might be frustrated because you think you can do the job of the manager better than the manager does. But I'll tell you, the people that are the most frustrated and angry and embittered, who are just like, I can't wait to be a manager because when I do, I'm just gonna so manage. Yeah, I'm gonna be so great. They get a rude awakening really quickly because they don't have the context of what it's like on the other side. First of all, that happens over and over again. Oh, that's what it's like. It's like when people become president, they say, all these things on the campaign trail. Then they get in, they're like, oh, by the way, you can't do those things. That's what I think. That's kind of what it's like on the other side. But it's also the attitude that they import into the role that basically smacks of this lack of humility. And it just gets translated into a toxic way of being a boss, where now you might think that you're doing a better job, but you're just adding more frustration to the mix. Leading from where you are is all about having a mature view of leadership, which means you don't need positional leadership to actually be a leader. You don't need authority necessarily to have gravitas in your voice, to have weight to what you say, because people see the way you live your professional life. If you say something to somebody, they will respect you. Now, that's ultimately what makes leadership a thing, is trust and respect. And I bet you could think of somebody who is not your boss, who you really trust and respect because of how they work and their knowledge, and not because they have a title. So a barista needs to be able to lead from where they are, because leadership is not about just a position and that authority that's bestowed upon that position. It's also something that can come peer to peer with respect. And you will see people get promoted who are able to lead, not against leadership, but within the context of the business. I'm not talking about, hey, I really respect so-and-so because they work really well and they always ignore the boss because the boss has bad ideas, and that's not what I'm talking about. You don't have to become a leader by basically undoing what your boss says so that everybody can be successful on the shift. And then when that stupid boss is gone, you'll become boss. That's the first thing that people will do to you. You've introduced this whole narrative that if you think you can do it better than the boss, then the way to be a leader is to subvert your boss. It's just not the way it works. So organize yourself, lead from where you are, learn that leadership is about trust. It's about serving. Leadership is service. It's not dictation. It's about serving the needs of others, and it is about making decisions. You do have to wield authority, but you're using that authority as a tool for the service of people, not for the service of yourself, which is why practicing being respectable a good employee and leading from where you are will help you practice humility because you're not getting rewarded for this necessarily. You don't have the position. You're doing it because it's right and because it's good. And you, no matter if you work there for 1 year or 10 years, you're going to have that as an asset personally that will serve you well past your work life into your personal life. So another part of being a barista today, to be successful, is to be flexible and also communicate well your boundaries. There are plenty of desperate people in coffee. A lot of them are managers and owners who will, because of their desperation, schedule you for times that maybe you are not available. And then they'll get frustrated because they're desperate. Now, are they trying to hurt you? No, they're trying to keep their business open. I can empathize with this. It's like, man, I just really need somebody to cover this shift and I haven't, been at home very often and it sucks that I have to cover this. And we've all been there. But we need to, as professionals, create clear boundaries with those who lead us because the temptation to cross those boundaries is almost universal. Does that make somebody a bad boss? No, it might mean they're just learning. And how they learn oftentimes is that they are given clear communication from the employee about what they can and cannot do. Now, this means that if the barista says, I can work on a certain day and time, and the manager says, that's wonderful because we need people to work on the weekend. And then you turn around and constantly ask off for weekends because things come up. You're not upholding your end of the bargain here. You're not thinking about others. You're basically going back on your word. Just as much as if you said, hey, I can't work Tuesday nights, I have a standing engagement that time. And the manager is saying like, hey, I know you said you can't work Tuesday nights, but I need you to work. I'll put you on the schedule. Just as much a frustration as, hey, I want to go to this concert and I know, you hired me basically to work weekends, but now I'm hardly working weekends. When you sign up to work at a coffee shop, you have to practice this whole idea of letting your yes be yes and your no be no. And when things change, you have to change according to the responsibility that you've picked up. This is basically adulting, if you will. I hate that word. But the idea that you can just make whatever decision you want and not worry about the wake that you leave behind is something that you should just toss in the garbage as soon as you sign up to be responsible for something outside of yourself. And by being an employee of a business, that's what you're doing. You're giving them the right to put you on the schedule according to what you've told them you can do. Now, if that changes permanently, you can say, yeah, I actually am no longer available to work weekends. I'm sorry, it changed. That might mean less shifts for you because just the nature of what's available, that's a mature way to go about it. But that's not what happens usually. It's either the owner or manager not respecting the boundary of the employee or the employee not respecting their commitment for availability that they told the owner, which now the business, and by the way, all your coworkers rely on you for. So yeah, you're limiting your freedom to work in a job. And you could trump that up to some kind of like, oh, this is wage slavery or something stupid like that. I don't know what that's supposed to accomplish. You get to work in your field of coffee and they will pay you what you've decided you want to get paid because you applied for the job. And now it's up to you to have the integrity to be consistent with your word. And if you are the type of person who constantly has this mindset of shifting all the time what you said you could do, but then you're mad that you're not a manager because you've been there for years, well, you need to look in the mirror and have a hard talk with yourself and say, have I been showing up as a professional? Have I honored my word? Have I communicated well to my boss, my availability, and have I followed through? Again, how are you supposed to be a boss and a manager that follows through for people the way, unless you are doing that with the commitments you make as a professional? So yes, you have to have boundaries. You can't just throw your entire life into work. Owners and managers, the same is true for you. Listen to our episode with Greg McEwen talking about effortless and the 85% rule. We need to leave margin for ourselves and other people. So when we do give our efforts to work, it is fruitful and we are not burning out. So you as a professional need to give boundaries. But in giving those boundaries, where you are working, you need to show up. You need to organize yourself in such a way that you're not going to oversleep. You're going to show up and you're going to give quality effort and work to the business. This is not just about whether you think that owner of that business deserves that. This has to do more of whether or not you're going to show up for your future self, for your coworkers, for the industry as a whole. Because again, where we are has to do with millions of individual decisions made daily in the coffee shop by people who are coffee professionals. And you can choose to be a part of the forward progress of that, or just more weight pulling it down. That said, there are opportunities that come up where you can show yourself to be flexible. The business is not always going to be just this machine that never experiences interruptions. Flexibility means that maybe one day there's a flood in the cafe and you lose a shift. Are you going to get that shift back? Maybe not. You can't just say, well, I need to get that shift back and, I got to work extra for that. Well, the business didn't make any money that day either. In fact, it cost them a lot of money and maybe they can't help you make up that shift. Now, they might try. I've been there, sure. There's actually, why don't you help us work this event that'll help you make up that money? And you need to live, you need to work. But the reality is it doesn't always just work out even and balance itself out. Sometimes the company needs a barista to cover a shift for another barista. Your flexibility is an asset. No one's saying that you need to say yes to everything, but you need to be able to say yes to some things. This whole quiet quitting thing, I understand when people are given more work but not paid for more work. That's totally a thing. Some people will take advantage of that. Not everybody, but there are some. I believe I'm a minority of people as bosses in coffee. But you need to be able to say yes to somebody who's called in sick and needs coverage for that shift. So build in some margin in your availability to be able to say yes to last minute things. And guess what? You can view it as another opportunity for you to do the work that you signed up to do and get better at it. Oh, I get to work another shift where I get to practice, not only helping out my friends and helping the business, but helping myself get better at this work. And I'm going to get paid more to do it because I'm going to be taking on this shift. Now, you might have to say no because you can't, or you're too tired, or you need rest. You have boundaries. But I think you need to factor in flexibility. That way, you're not going to feel as taken advantage of. But you as a barista should develop a reputation as somebody who, on a pretty regular occasion, will cover something, will be flexible with changes, will be gracious, and understand this is a dynamic business. And it's not always exactly the same every day, every week or month. And that's an important realization because as you grow in maturity as a professional and as a person, life becomes way less predictable. And as you have practiced flexibility, as you become a manager or a boss or whatever, you're going to be way more gracious when things change in your role. And when other people have to rely on you to be flexible, you're already going to have practiced that, as well as having some clearly communicated boundaries. Now, there are two more things I want to talk about here. First is the idea that when you're in this role, now I talked about how you need to get the information you need, study the rules, know that business, know it so well. That's your expertise. You're going to receive instruction from people who may or may not speak your love language. They may or may not, deliver it in such a way that tickles you, right? But it is information, and you need to receive it as much as you can. You might not prefer it, but you need to receive instruction. In fact, you need to seek instruction. You need to ask questions. Be a learner. Being, again, learner of what it means to be successful, making a ton of teas and mochas and things with whipped cream on it and bagel sandwiches. That is your expertise. If you're not an expert in that and you're not like trying to be the absolute best in your cafe at cleaning the toilet and melting cheese perfectly on an egg sandwich, if that's not what your best skill set is, I don't think you have earned the right to go reading books about coffee outside of your area of responsibility. That's just me personally. because it's a false sense of development. So be an expert in those things and receive instruction from the people who are there to instruct you. And where they don't have the information to do the work well that you currently do, then you can go out and get that information. But you need to humble yourself, be willing to be led, receive instruction, receive feedback. People will give you feedback about the job you're doing. And I've seen it so much. And personally, I've done this many times. I get defensive. I get so defensive because I don't like the way they said it, or who are they? They can't even do this as well as I do. And they're giving me this information. Are they wrong though? Are they wrong? I mean, maybe they are, but many times what I've seen is that, yeah, you're right, but I don't like you. Yeah, you're right, but I'm a latte art champion. Receive instruction with humility. First of all, you're not all that. None of us are. We are all becoming. We all give each other grace for our imperfections. We're trying to reach higher degrees of imperfection. That's all we're doing. Receive instruction with humility. And also receive compliments. Receive compliments well. Let it go down deep into your soul that you did a good job. Someone says you did a good job, be like, I did a good job. That's great. You know? And yeah, I'm a big proponent of saying, look, managers, don't just do a passive good job. You know, be specific, be meaningful. But sometimes as people learn as leaders and they just give you just blanket compliments, don't just cross that off and be like, well, they didn't mean it. They're just saying that. No, take it, own it, receive it. Receive that compliment and keep everything in perspective. I mean, somebody might say, hey, you're the best barista here. Now, you could let that go to your head and you could start being all prideful. And I know I just said you should try to make, bagel sandwiches better than anybody else. Not as a way of trying to get one up on everybody. Maybe just make it as best you can. The whole idea here is that take everything with a grain of salt, but let it be meaningful to you. Let the instruction help you. Let the compliments encourage you. Let yourself see that you can still make progress, but still look at the progress that you've made. And that's a holistic way of viewing what you're doing. As a professional, we have to have that kind of a focus on the small things that we do every day, but we also have to take the 30,000-foot view on occasion and be like, you know what? I am better this year than I was last year at these things. I have these great goals and I've actually accomplished some things toward those goals. And I am becoming a better coffee professional because I have started with what I'm responsible for, because I've showed up at work with, the kind of effort and the kind of attitude that creates a wonderful experience for my coworkers, that creates success for them and the customers and success for this business and my boss. And I am becoming more successful as a result. I'm becoming more mature. You need to reflect. That's the last thing I'll say here is regular reflection and small steps is how you progress. You might not stay a barista forever, but even in this entry-level position of barista, regular reflection on your performance and who you are at work and where you are going as a professional and how you are serving others in what you do daily is just always a great thing to do. Bookend your day. Before you go into the shift, think about what's going to happen, show up, organize yourself, dedicate yourself, be there, present, ready to serve, all the things we talked about. And then at the end of the day, reflect again. Do this kind of intentional practice and you'll make small steps toward, whatever you want. You want to be a barista champion? You can do it. You want to be a manager? You want to be an owner of your own coffee shop? You can do it. These are all things that are possible for you. You might leave the coffee industry and just have a wonderful time of growth. Not perfect, not without its hardships or tensions, the ebb and flow, all that stuff, but wonderful in that it was so formative. And you'll be proud that you showed up as well as you could in that role as a barista. It'll make you a better human being. If it isn't a coffee professional role that you want in the future, it'll just make you better. This is the new age of the barista. A barista is somebody who delivers an exquisite, an excellent, an ever valuable experience for their coworkers, for the customers, and takes their role as this last link in the value chain so seriously in the daily work. I don't want to discourage you from having aspirations, but I want to encourage you to keep grounded. Pursue excellence where you are. Don't let this wide world of coffee that we have access to, the global industry, go from inspiration to disillusionment. Coming back from competitions or reading books and watching videos and then working on your shift, and somehow everything doesn't seem as bright, and this is just my job, and that kind of thing. Look, those things are great for inspiration, but there's lots of inspiration to be had right in the four walls of the cafe where you are. That's how sustainable growth is made, not by just grass is greener mentality, but by mining the depths of the gift that you've been given and the opportunity to work in coffee where you are. That's how you're going to be a successful barista. It's not always a pretty role. Like, I mentioned cleaning toilets, doing a lot of, stocking and menial tasks, like having people's eyes light up with that aha moment of coffee as you hand them a cup and you tell them a story about a farmer. Like, that doesn't happen very often. The work is hard. And if you're not prepared for it, and if you're not dedicated to finding and mining that experience for joy, for inspiration, then what it has to offer you will just pass you by. And you'll always believe that it was something else, when in fact it could have been just that we weren't tuned in. I've done that in my career before plenty of times. I could have learned so much more. I could have showed up so much more, but I was wasting time being frustrated and entitled and bittered and complaining and all this other stuff. I don't want that for you, Let's minimize that as much as we can. So these are just some thoughts on what I believe it means to be a successful barista today. And honestly, think about these things in terms of just a successful coffee professional. You could be a manager, a boss, and apply all these same things. But if you're a barista and you're just starting out especially, and you can manage to do these things, man, you are going to be some of the best leaders that we've ever had. And our coffee shops and our industry is going to be all the better for having you in it. So thanks everybody for listening today. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. Always love hearing from you. And maybe you have some ideas of stuff that I left out, just thoughts on what was said. Again, would love to receive a message, chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting, that's also where to reach me, chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate your support of the show. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episodes on social media, especially with your coworkers and people that need to hear this information. And it really just goes a long way to spread the word about this podcast. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.